Well, I'm in a different location. I'm in Mountain Home, Idaho, with my middle daughter Katie and her husband Tom and our two grandsons Charlie and Wally. It's good. We're having a ball, which means I've got to be a little creative in being able to put together my Soul Care with Stevie Boy installments. That's what I'm up to right now. And anyway, let's dive in. I'll be very surprised if you have ever encountered anyone named Diotrephes. And the reason for that is simple, is because nobody would probably, I can't think of anybody, I'll just put it that way, who would name their kid Diotrephes. Because, pretty simple explanation, Diotrephes was a jerk. Most people are not going to name their kids after a jerk. Now, some people might name a pet, if their pet's a jerk, after a jerk. It'd be more of a joke than it would be anything. Well, Diotrephes is, if he has any fame, and he has some renown among Bible scholars and Bible students, but beyond that, none. But his fame is not for what, I'll just put it this way. I wouldn't want this to be why I'm famous, and you wouldn't either. John talks about him in 3 John, well, there's only one chapter, so we're looking at verse 9. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first, will not welcome us. Wow, what an epitaph. There's a lot of things that I can think of that I might want on my, I've told you this before, on my tombstone, which I'm not going to have. He loved to be first is not one of them. If you're an athlete, then he was a fierce competitor would probably be appropriate. And if you're an athlete, be a fierce competitor. But if you're a leader in the church, being a fierce competitor is not what your role is about. I mean, here's an idea. Love God, love people. I don't think that's too far out of the realm of reason. I just think, and Diotrephes, well, he wasn't there. I told you last time, I just feel like Diotrephes and people like him who share this love of being first they're cancers in the church. They create an unhealthy environment. Their expectations, their hopes, their desires, they don't fit with God's design for his church, his family. Diotrephes, who loved to be first, was a hindrance to the truth and wholeness of the gospel going out from this particular church. I mean, God, he's big enough. He's so big, Diotrephes isn't going to hold him back. But it's what the people close to him and what he missed out on, because I told you last time, you can't be first, I can't be first, Diotrephes can't be first, and Jesus be first at the same time. It's not possible. It's not just that, it's not desirable. Well, it's not desirable, but it is not possible. It's got to be one or the other. I wonder if there are things in our lives as followers of Jesus that we need to take a close look at to figure out who is first. Is Jesus first? Is this leader I want to impress first? Is this big donor first? Or is my spouse first? Are my kids first? See, you have to, in order to follow Christ according to his best design, it's my opinion, that you've got to figure out who is first, who is the center. And there's only one appropriate center, and that's Jesus Christ. I don't think, I don't want, as a follower of Christ, I think of myself as a serious follower of Christ, is on a journey to becoming fully devoted. I don't want to be held hostage by, is Jesus at the center? Is Jesus at the center? Is Jesus? See, then it becomes not about grace. It becomes about performance. Grace says, hold Jesus at the center. Not because if you don't, you're going to get smacked or you're going to get punished, because that's where life and health and vitality are. Hold Jesus at the center because that's where he belongs. That's how life works. I think we do have to, if not constantly, then routinely examine our own lives and ask ourselves, is Christ at the center? Is he number one, or am I trying to be first? I call that the Diotrephes complex. Now, if you're a real gutsy person, it would be worth it to talk to not people that need to tell you what you need to hear or what you think you want to hear. You need to talk to people who are just going to give it to you straight. Ask them, who do you see at the center of my life? Don't lead them on, just ask. Now, if they're not believers, I don't think they're going to be able to answer that question very well, although their observations might still be useful. But like your spouse, your kids who are old enough to figure out what you're asking, that's for a lot of people, their best friend. My best friend is, my wife is my number one best friend, but my other best friend, he might dance around a little bit, but he would tell me. He would give me the truth. That's who you want to ask. Then here, maybe this is the most important of all. A worthy prayer would be, Heavenly Father, show me who's first in my life. Who's at the center? Who gets first place? And then you have to be quiet, but I think he'll give you insight into that. Okay. Diotrephes, who loves to be first, will not welcome us. How would that? I'm trying to think. John writes a letter. Diotrephes somehow makes it clear to John they are not welcome as friends, guests, visitors. That's kind of a piggish thing. Dear John, got your letter the other day. You're not welcome here. Stay away. Period. Oh, in Christian love, Diotrephes. Gosh. Verse 10. So when I come, now that's an interesting thing. Diotrephes says, you're not welcome here. John goes, oh, really? Well, I'm coming. So when I come, I will call attention to what he is doing, spreading malicious nonsense about us. John was the apostle of love, but he was not a wiener dog. He wasn't just this milquetoast, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. No. When I come, by the way, Diotrephes, whether you want to welcome me or not, that won't keep me from coming. Because I'm coming. And when I do, I'm calling you out. It's kind of like there's going to be a gunfight at the OK Corral between John and Diotrephes. I would have liked to have been there to see how that works. A lot of people like Diotrephes have such an inflated sense of ego that generally they They believe that they are capable of more, gaining and sustaining more general public support than they really can. Because I have this feeling that as John writes this letter, he knows. And I think one of the reasons he knows is because the Holy Spirit is writing through him. But I think the other side of that is his human intuition knows that Diotrephes is not who he thinks he is. There's a lot of people who think they're number one, and they're not. They think they have this authority, this power, and they don't. And I think John is saying, he's implying, hey, die. I'm coming. And I'm not just coming for you, but when I get there, I'm calling you out. I will call attention to what he is doing. Spreading malicious nonsense about us. Misinformation. Why does that ring a bell? You know what? We're not the first generation to have to deal with misinformation. Okay. Then John goes on. Not satisfied with that, he even refuses to welcome other believers. Come on. I mean, this is almost neurotic. I think it is neurotic. It's like, no, nobody else, just us. I'm not. No. Don't bring anybody else in here because they'll pollute the waters. Dude, you've already polluted them. Not satisfied with that, he even refuses to welcome other believers. Do you get this impression that Diotrephes is not the guy that you want to have on your board of directors? And one of the reasons is because he won't be on unless he can be the chairman. Second is he will never tolerate a dissenting view. He stops those who want to do so and puts them out of the church. What gives him the right for that? Well, here's what I think is in Diotrephes' mind. This is my church. I'll tell you who is in and who is not. And you're not. Big problem with people who love to be first. They have no perspective about who's the owner of the church. Now, that's just conjecture on my part about Diotrephes. I'm just saying. Now, there is such a thing as legitimate church discipline. Paul writes about that in 1 Corinthians, where he calls out a man and his, I think it's his stepmother. I mean, that's the language. It's his father's wife now that are living together, not in a platonic way. And he says, this guy needs to be out of your fellowship. Disfellowship him. But in 2 Corinthians, he says, okay, the discipline has done its job. Now accept him back into the fellowship, embrace him back into the family. So that the point of church discipline is discipline to direct one's behavior, to change one's behavior toward what works. And in this context, what is right. Well, Diotrephes stops those who want to to be included and puts them out of the church. Wow. The whole subject of church discipline it's kind of it's a little bit testy, and one of the reasons is it requires maturity and finesse. If you're not a mature person, if your church is not populated with mature leaders, church discipline is going to be really, really ugly. It's going to be messy no matter what. But it will get very ugly when leaders are not godly and mature. And I think it's safe to say Diotrephes, this is not the profile of a godly, mature person. This is a profile of a religious dictator. And I think if he had been alive today, he would have fallen in the category of the religious or spiritual abuser. I have one idea for us if we encounter someone who's got this diatrophy syndrome going. Avoid them. If you find yourself in a church where diatrophy has risen to the top, here's my thing. I would say find another fellowship, find another church, and just test it about its fundamental value and health and all of the things that you would test it. But here's the thing. I don't think you're going to change diatrophies. The Apostle John, my sense is, because we don't have anything after this about what this confrontation between John and Diotrephes. Golly, I wish we did. But this is the last letter that John wrote to this church, and he only talks about his intention for when he gets there. What happened when he got there, we don't know. But I have a feeling, just on the basis of, and I've never really encountered a full-on Diotrephes, but I've encountered a lot of, maybe not a lot, several, who, leaders in the church, they struggle with the humility that's required to lead in grace. And of all the things that Diotrephes is missing, humility is at the top of that list. Well, okay, I just looked at the clock and I'm 2 minutes over. We're going to quit. And I got a couple of last thoughts about Diotrephes we'll talk about next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.